Today, I want to expose Ken Griffin's full list of donations, and I also want to talk about some other people or criminals that have made large political donations in the past, and how donating to the right people can grant you many blessings from FINRA and the SEC. So stay tuned, and let's make some money. And now I want to dive straight in with the key information. So, Frank tweeted saying Ken Griffin gave millions of dollars to politicians, but there hasn't been a full list of the politicians he paid until now. Right here we can see a giant list of political candidates that have received directly from Ken Griffin between $2,500 and $20,000. Now these candidates have received the money directly themselves, not directly to their campaigns. Obviously, if you include the campaign funding into this, the amount donated is significantly higher. This is just the donations purely coming from Ken Griffin directly to those political candidates. And in total, when you include those campaign contributions, Ken Griffin has donated well over $125 million. I'll be sure to leave a link down below to this link of individuals that have received money from Ken Griffin and all of the campaigns and companies that have also received money as well. They may say, well, Tom, surely Ken Griffin just loves giving away his money. Ken Griffin doesn't mind taking losses in the stock market, he does everything fully legit, and he loves donating to politicians. Well, that could potentially be true, but allegedly Ken Griffin never loses money, not in the stock market, and he never donates money to politicians, allegedly, unless there's some way it could benefit him. As a prime example, many other political candidates also receive money from none other than Sam Bankman-Fried, who's just been charged by the SEC. Unusual Wells tweeted saying 1 in every 3 of the 535 senators and representatives in the current US Congress have received campaign support from one of the senior executives of FTX. And only 19 of those 196 congresspeople who took money from FTX have actually stated they will return the funds. The other 177 members either haven't responded or potentially have donated some of their money back to charity, but that money could still be clawed back. Now it says more than 1 in 3 of the 535 senators and representatives in the current US Congress showed up to the new session with FTX baggage. Many of those senators and representatives were only just sworn in last week and took cash directly from Sam Bankman-Fried or other senior executives at FTX. And now somebody else that was very, very keen on making donations was, of course, Bernie Madoff. Bernie and Ruth contributed around $240,000 to federal candidates, parties, and committees. Now you may be saying, Tom, why would these criminals and current hedge fund managers be donating such significant sums to politicians? Well, it seems like donating to politicians seems to pull you tons and tons of favours with FINRA and the SEC. As Red was tweeted, he said this is from 2013, but it's a lawsuit from an ex-FINRA employee. He brought to light the fact that FINRA's system allowed large firms or specific hedge funds to defy the SEC's limits on leverage. This here says an ex-FINRA employee filed a whistleblower suit back in 2013. It says a former FINRA employee, Joseph, claimed in a suit filed last week that he worked as a principal examiner for FINRA in 2010 when he discovered that the regulator's system allowed large firms to circumvent an SEC rule limiting leverage to 15 times net capital. Just a quick one, guys, if you haven't already, be sure to drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel and ding that notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Now firstly, let's just look at actually how crazy that sounds. 15 times net capital. That means if I take a short or long position with $1,000, I could actually be taking an underlying position of $15,000. If I had a $10 billion hedge fund, I could be taking positions worth in total up to $150 billion. Now we know that Citadel uses around a 7 to 8 times leverage ratio. Citadel manages or was managing around $40 billion in equity, but has a portfolio value of around $250 billion. Now I'm sure after Ken Griffin's brilliant year and all of those profits he generated, and I'm sure never hid any losses, the amount of equity he's now managing is probably more, but so is his portfolio value, I'm sure. But the SEC rule was limiting leverage to 15 times net capital, but actually many of these hedge funds could circumvent these rules. So even though Citadel says they have a 7 to 8 times leverage ratio, they could potentially be taking on a 10, 15, 20, 25, maybe even a 30 times leverage ratio. They could actually be shorting AMC, GameStop and many other stocks even harder than we think they are. We know they supposedly have a portfolio value of $250 billion and be managing around $40 billion in equity, but actually if they're using larger leverage than they should be, their portfolio value or total short position value may be even larger than we thought. It says according to the complaint filed in federal court, Joseph said he was initially commended for his financial expertise and asked to design a better risk rating methodology with response to broker-dealers. But later he was downgraded and placed on probation and fired in May 2011 without a legitimate reason. In the suit, he claimed that FINRA illegally discriminated against him on the basis of age and fired him for threatening to disclose the risk rating flaw to other regulators and to the public. So it seems clearly that FINRA is not interested in the risk that many of these hedge funds are taking on and is actually specifically allowing them to take on more risk than they really should be. Maybe that's part of the reason as to why the market recently has been so volatile, seeing 2 to 3% swings on the S&P 500 practically every single day. We're seeing tons more stocks having over 100% runs practically on a daily basis, some stocks even running 2, 3, 4 or 5,000% every single day, just like HKD did last year. I imagine all of this volatility is likely being caused by hedge funds taking on more and more risk. They lost tons of money last year and potentially the year before, and now they're basically YOLO trading to make it all back. Obviously, the money that these hedge funds trade with isn't their own money, it's their clients' money. Therefore, if they do lose it, it's not the end of the world, they just close down the fund. But obviously, if they have taken on 20, 30, 40, 50% losses or even more, they need to try their hardest to take on more risk to get the money back. Maybe that's why we're seeing over 100% runs practically on a daily basis when a stock is shorted so heavily and so illegally, using more leverage than these hedge funds should really be taking on. Then all of a sudden when the stock starts to turn around, they have to panic and close out of their entire position. And obviously that is the exact thing that will happen when the market crashes and when AMC turns around and has its next run up and ends up squeezing. Now, in terms of AMC squeezing, Dave Murphy has said, what if there was a secret word or phrase that was used to notify funds to position accordingly before a huge run up? That'd be crazy, right? Well, back in April of 2021, there was an article posted by The Motley Fool saying that AMC Entertainment is 38% undervalued. Typically, these mainstream media outlets say that AMC is overvalued and say that it's only worth a couple of pennies, and therefore you should definitely be shorting AMC. But now it seems these mainstream media outlets are saying that AMC is actually undervalued and that AMC represents a good investment and is likely to run up in the future. And Dave Murphy has also plotted these two articles on a chart for a better view. We can see that analysts are saying that AMC is undervalued back here in April before the June run-up. Could the mainstream media potentially be warning hedge funds of another coming run-up, especially as AMC has been turning around over the last week or so? And on top of that, we're also seeing Genesis Global Capital laying the groundwork for a bankruptcy filing as soon as this week. This is the crypto lending unit of DCG has been in confidential negotiations with various creditor groups amid a liquidity crunch. It said it's warned that it may need to file for bankruptcy if it fails to raise cash, and you'll know that I spoke on this recently as there was zero interest in a new capital raise. As there's zero interest in this new capital raise, it looks like DCG and Genesis could be going bankrupt as early as this week. It is obviously trying to work things out with creditors and has suggested receiving a mixture of cash and equity from DCG. Basically, the creditors would be bailing DCG out temporarily. I imagine that probably won't fly considering the current crypto market conditions, and therefore DCG and Genesis will likely be going bankrupt. And I think if that happens, Gemini the exchange could potentially be going under as well, as there's tons of cash from that Gemini exchange stuck in Genesis. And obviously if another crypto exchange, Gemini, ends up blowing up, who knows what could happen next. We'd likely see even more crypto exchanges blowing up again, and Bitcoin potentially setting new recent lows. And finally, as the Kabesi letter tweeted, they said just in. After today's announcement that Microsoft will be laying off 10,000 employees, tech layoffs in 2023 are now at a total of 35,000 employees. Since October, we've seen almost double the amount of tech layoffs as 2001. Right now, tech is currently laying off more employees than we saw during the dot-com boom and the effective dot-com implosion. We're also not just seeing tech laying off employees, we're also seeing the banking and financial sectors also laying off tons of employees as well. Clearly, these major banks and these major tech companies are expecting not just a mild recession in 2023, but a giant recession. But guys, be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as always guys, be sure to ding that notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers.